Many new converts are initially contacted through their well-publicized prophecy seminars. These seminars are usually advertised without the Seventh-day Adventist name attached. People are often unaware of the Adventist sponsorship. In addition, they use their highly touted 5-day stop smoking classes and vegetarian cooking courses to proselytize as well. Although considered by many to be a mainstream Christian denomination, Seventh-day Adventism differs from evangelical Christianity in a number of pivotal theological areas. To determine the significance of these differences, one must examine the teachings of the late Seventh-day Adventist founder, Ellen G. White. Born on November 26, 1827, in Gorham, Maine, Ellen was hit in the head with a rock at the age of 9. She remained unconscious for 3 weeks, unable to attend school following the incident. Ellen's education ceased at the 3rd grade level. Both her health and her emotions remained fragile as she grew older. David Snyder spent 22 years as an Adventist pastor. His discovery of a number of historical inconsistencies within Adventism led to his termination without a pension just 6 months short of retirement.
Her maiden name was Ellen Gould Harmon, and she was raised in a devout Methodist home. Her Methodist family came under the influence of William Miller, a powerful preacher. He taught that Christ would return first in 1843 and then on October 22nd, 1844, supposedly the Jewish Day of Atonement for that year. However, using information from the Universal Jewish Encyclopedia, we find that in 1844, the Day of Atonement began after sundown, September 23rd, not October 22nd. So this crucial date in Adventism was flawed, incorrect from the very beginning. William Miller's meetings were marked by much emotionalism and a great deal of hysteria over Christ's imminent return. Ellen Harmon was a willing participant, but when Christ did not return when Miller predicted, she dissolved into tears and prayers and remained, as she said, in this hopeless condition for months. Ellen White just could not accept the fact that Christ did not return in 1843 or 1844. She could not admit her mistake. Interestingly enough, William Miller did. Instead, she claimed she had a vision from God, the first of many.
I have seen that the 1843 chart was directed by the hand of the Lord, and that it should not be altered, that the figures were as He wanted them, that His hand was over and hid a mistake in some of the figures.
Rather than admit that she was in error, Ellen Harmon claimed that God was the one who had made the mistake and had covered it up Himself. Ellen's controversial vision forced the readjustment of many Adventist dates and doctrines. Even though the 1843 date had now been adjusted to 1844, it was still in error. Nevertheless, the 1844 date became the foundation for many central Adventist doctrines and beliefs, which continue to be held to this day.
She became Ellen White upon her marriage to another former Millerite believer, James White, in 1846. Because she claimed to have the spirit of prophecy, she came to be the visible, absolute authority figure for the initially small group of Adventist believers.
I am presenting to you that which the Lord has presented to me. I do not write one article in the paper expressing merely my own ideas. They are what God has opened before me in vision, the precious rays of light shining from the throne.
Her writings grew to be 17 times as large as the entire Bible. Her followers were to reference these 5,000 articles, 49 books, plus 55,000 manuscript pages she claimed to write, and regard them as being as inspired as the Bible through Ellen White's pen of inspiration. To this day, official publications of the Church have used her writings as the last word on doctrine. In the 27 points of fundamental beliefs, they state that the Bible is a source of authority, but they also say that her writings are a continuing and authoritative source of truth. They have, however, made her more embarrassing writings unavailable, locking them securely away in the White Estate vault. Mrs. White wrote on nearly every area of Christian life. Many of her writings were done from Elmshaven, her California home. She claimed an angel stood by her bed near this chair in her bedroom. They further believe that the three angels mentioned in the Bible book of Revelation carried three unique messages: the investigative judgment, the Saturday Sabbath, and Sunday worship being the mark of the beast.
Sidney Cleveland was an ordained Seventh-day Adventist minister who pastored 13 churches between 1979 and 1990. While doing research for a planned book validating the divine inspiration behind Ellen G. White, Cleveland discovered so many false prophecies that he became disenchanted. Eventually, he published his findings in a book titled Whitewashed, Uncovering the Myths of Ellen G. White.
The Seventh-day Adventist Church was founded on prophecies concerning the second coming of Jesus Christ. It's no coincidence that the Bible contains many warnings about false prophets. The Bible test of a false prophet in Deuteronomy chapters 13 and 18 is simply whether or not the prophecy comes true. It's a matter of historical record that the following prophecies of Ellen G. White did not come true as she foretold.
Then I was pointed to some who are in the great error of believing that it is their duty to go to Old Jerusalem and think that they have work to do there before the Lord comes. I saw that Satan had greatly deceived some in this thing. I also saw that Old Jerusalem never would be built up.
The exact opposite of Ellen White's prediction has happened. Old Jerusalem has been greatly built up in the years since 1948, when Israel became a nation. She was absolutely wrong. Again, Mrs. White foretold in early writings that she would be among the living saints when Jesus returned.
Soon our eyes were drawn to the east, for a small black cloud had appeared, about half as large as a man's hand, which we all knew was the sign of the Son of Man. The graves opened, and in the same moment we were changed and caught up together with them to meet the Lord in the air.
Mrs. White was not among the living saints seen in her vision. This event did not occur in her lifetime. We are still looking for the glorious return of our Lord Jesus Christ. Rather than being caught up with the living saints at Jesus' return, Mrs. White died on July 16, 1915, and was buried beside her husband James. Another one of her prophecies failed. Like others of her time, Mrs. White taught the imminent end of the world to spur on her workers. In early writings in the 1850s, she urged the new converts on, telling them they only had a few months to wait.
But now time is almost finished, and what we have been years learning, they will have to learn in a few months.
These were not isolated prophecies, but restated over and over again. In May 1856, at a church meeting in Battle Creek, Michigan, Mrs. White boldly stated,
I saw that some of those present would be food for worms, some subjects for the 7 last plagues, and some would be translated to heaven at the second coming of Christ without seeing death.
In biblical times, she would have been stoned to death for being a false prophet. Mrs. White did not confine her prophesying to the events surrounding the coming of the Lord, but prophesied how foreign governments would act against the United States. In 1862, Ellen White predicted the downfall of the United States following a great war involving many nations. During the Civil War, she prophesied that England would declare war on the northern states and humble them into the dust.
Said the angel, when England does declare war, all nations will have an interest of their own to serve, and there will be general war, general confusion. This nation will yet be humbled into the dust.
History proves the utter error of this prophecy. England did not declare war on the northern states. Other nations did not join in. The United States of America was not humbled into the dust in defeat. Mrs. White, again, clearly to the objective mind, prophesied falsely.